All right. Hey, wasabi gangsters. It's me, Chance. Usually I show you my Darth Revan lightsaber, which is I use as a tripod, but for this video, I kind of like reposition myself a little bit because I'm doing a top 10. Don't worry about what you see here. Well, actually this is Alavist, all right? This is the very first Dungeons & Dragons mini I had painted for me. I haven't played in so long, but this character is what sparked my love for, well, pretty much writing as it is, and potentially reading, but anyways, I digress. Today we're doing a top 10 video, and I'm going to put in probably a bunch of honorable mentions because there's about 15 or 16 books that at any point in time can be slotted in or out of my top 10. We're going off the cuff, no edits. I will try and do chapters below. I've never done that before in my weekly videos. But as of the recording of this video, I'm going away Wednesday to the Midwest. So I am recording this in advance, 2 days after my most recent weekly update, but that I do on reading every Friday. This is going up in lieu of a weekly update. So with that said, let us get into the honorable mentions. This is pure, I understand there's a lot of series that I haven't read. That said, most of what I put today, with the exception of 3 books that I mentioned, was read between April of 2023 and April of 2024. So a lot of my most recent fantasy science fiction reading has been done in the last 16, 17 months. With that said, before that, it was a lot of nonfiction that I did before I really discovered my love for the reading medium of fantasy science fiction versus like television or movies. So as I get into this is kind of sharing with you guys, so when you come to this channel, you kind of know what to expect as far as taste is concerned. I'm currently reading Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and 30% in, I already know that it would be on this list, but because it's not done, I'm not including it. Also, another rule that I have intoned in this is 1 book per series, which I know you see this one up here already. So let's just get into it. This is an honorable mention. This is not in the top 10. Golden Sun. I'm currently on Dark Age of the Red Rising saga, and Golden Sun was probably my favorite. Morningstar, I think, had a little bit, which I also loved, but I think as far as the series is concerned, of the 4 books I've read so far, this one probably gripped me the most. This one was the most enticing to me. The twist at the end was very exhilarating. I'm sure everyone, like, this is non-spoiler, so that said, everybody who's read this book has pretty much the same thing to say about it in terms of how good it is, and I'm excited to get into Dark Age here pretty soon, and we'll see how that goes. Next up, this was an audiobook read as well. That one I did on Tim J.R.R. Reynolds, blah, blah, blah. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this is the first and only Brandon Sanderson book I've read so far, and I know there's a lot of people on this that are going to be watching this video. They're like, wow, 2nd book in, he's only read 1 Brando Sando. I love this book. It was really good. I listened to it. It's very long, obviously, but that said, I love a long book. You'll see in my top 10 that there's plenty. Being that I've only read 1 of these right now, obviously my nostalgia toward it, or my emotional connection to it, is limited simply because I haven't read Words of Radiance yet. I'm probably going to listen to it before the end of the year. This one is very, very good. I'll mention also, now that I'm talking about it, Game of Thrones. I've only read up to the 2nd book so far. Another book that I just have to get to, but it's just, there's so many good books that I have to read, and I've discovered my favorite authors along the way and fell in love with them. So don't worry, these are books that I will be getting to. Obviously, Game of Thrones, there's no rush, simply because it hasn't finished yet. That said, I don't want to do a disservice by not ever reading it. So that's one that I plan on getting back to soon. Next up, this is the book that actually got me into reading fiction. It's historical fiction. It's called Gates of Fire. Told through the narrative of a prisoner of Xerxes after the death of Leonidas. And essentially, Xerxes is asking, how did this man inspire so much passion from his soldiers? It takes place at, it's the Battle of Thermopylae, the Gates of Fire. Absolutely phenomenal book. This one gets mixed reviews out there. Stephen Pressfield is actually one of those authors that would slot into my top 10 authors simply just because of a lot of his nonfiction work. I've read Tides of War, and another one of his more Roman Empire focused books. But yeah, they are, I mean, I love it. Simple writing style, very easy to follow. He always talks about the daemon, the inner self, and the muse, and it is a fantastic read. Again, we're not even in the top 10 yet, okay? This is just all honorable mentions. Because again, they slot in and out. Next up, this is the only time I've broken the rule for one book per series because these two are virtually tied for me. And that is True Believer and Savage Son by J.R.R. This is books 2 and 3 in the Terminal List series. And both of these books, the further I get away from them, the more I find that Savage Son appeals to me. That said, True Believer is just an absolutely fantastic story of redemption. And I love this series. I read it every year it comes out. I most recently read Red Sky Morning. And again, giant fan of the series. So moving on, this one is going to probably get the most flack because you're going to see other books in my top 10 and you're going to be like, wow, how is this one not in there? And that is going to be The Lord of the Rings. Now, I'm not including all three, although if I could, I would, being that this version is all three put in one. So cheating-wise, I would mention it as that. If I had to pick one book from the series that I love the most, it is The Fellowship of the Ring, which is crazy because I love the Return of the King movie more than I do the third book in the Lord of the Rings series. But The Fellowship of the Ring was absolutely amazing, which is so funny. I loved it. Again, any one of these books can cycle into my top 10 in any given moment. So keep that in mind as you're listening to this. This is just me ranking them currently with my current feelings, having done a list. And then before the final honorable mention, before I get into my top 10, 6.5 minutes in, I will probably have to figure out these chapters for you guys, is Dark Matter. Such a quick read and very thought-provoking. The series on Apple TV was also very good. We read this before I even knew it was going to be a series, and I loved it. I love the questions posed. I love the thoughts provoked. You know, it's a very interesting story about what would have happened if I made X choice instead of Y choice, or Y choice instead of X choice. Probably better, more appropriately put that way. Now we're going to move into the top 10. Okay, here we are. Number 10. Ooh, I almost moved to the pile of books, but I actually don't have a physical copy of this. The Stand by Stephen King. Number 10. Good versus evil. Traditionally, if you love Lord of the Rings, you probably would love The Stand, which with the way that the book is told, you probably would not think that because it's not fantasy. I mean, it can be. It's more post-apocalyptic. And it takes a lot of twists and turns. It subverts expectations. It's beautiful character work. Again, would slide up this list any particular day. Just right now I have it at number 10. That said, I'm going to pause this real quick. I'm actually going to have to edit. I never edit, by the way. So I'm going to have to edit because I have to throw the AC on high because I'm smoking hot right now. Give me a second. I never do that. I never do cuts. Wow, that feels weird. But this is going to be a long one. So The Stand at number 10, moving on to number 9, which is another post-apocalyptic book, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Now, the father-son aspect of this book is really what sold this for me in terms of the man and the boy and their journey across this post-apocalyptic landscape after God knows what. And I don't want to spoil it, but this book, the aspect of carrying the fire, this is a beautiful book. As someone who I lost my father 11 years ago, and maybe that's why I'm so emotionally tied to this book. And it was beautifully written. He doesn't use quotation marks, but I'd say of the two books I've gotten into of Cormac McCarthy, Blood Meridian being the other, this one is a lot easier to follow as far as the dialogue is concerned, even without the quotation marks. And it's such a quick read. It is so worth it. My girlfriend's reading this right now. And at number 9, The Road, Cormac McCarthy. If you want a good story of father-son and turmoil and very dark, very grim, but it is beautifully told. It evokes the right emotions out of you, if I can use that word. But yeah, The Road, Cormac McCarthy, number 9. Number 8. We have, let me load this puppy back up, make sure I'm on track here. 10, 9, 8, The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. Tad Williams would easily slot into probably one of my top 3, top 4 authors. I am not doing that list right now simply because I think I needed more under my belt before I get into that list. And the Dragonbone chair, particularly in the series of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this was my introduction to fantasy, which, if anybody who's read this book knows, is in terms of like novels. This was, and I was like, oh, George R.R. Martin read it, it inspired George R.R. Martin. Obviously, I have to read it. If it inspired him, it'll inspire me. I mean, it did. It's one of the most beautifully written fantasy stories that I've read so far. And I picked this one over to Green Angel Tower and the Stone of Farewell. And I also have read The Heart of What Was Lost. I plan on moving into the Last King of Austenard series at some point in the near future, just simply because I miss Tad Williams. I miss his writing, and I miss his world. I missed Austenard. This book is no joke. It is... I typically wouldn't pick a number 1 in a series, and after saying Fellowship of the Ring, you're probably like, Chance, you're BSing me. But no, this was, of the 3 books, if I could pick the last half of Stone of Farewell, I probably would say that over this. That said, the introduction to Simon and Benedict and just the whole crew in this book, and every which way that he tells this story, the unique character voices, not quite as unique as Joe Abercrombie, but definitely unique. You know, the story of magic swords. I'm sorry about the glare. This has everything you want in a fantasy story, and there, as far as an intro to a fantasy series, fantasy in general for me, the names of things in this book were a giant obstacle, and I kind of just pushed through, and I'm happy I did, because, and the pacing of this one is very slowly paced, but worth every bit of the slow burn. This one does seem to get a lot of, I don't want to say hate or flack. Some people, it just isn't their type of story to be like, as far as how they receive story, and that's fine. For me, it was impactful. I loved it. I enjoyed every second of it. I enjoyed all the characters throughout the series. This one is my favorite in the series. This is number 8, Tad Williams, The Dragonbone Chair. Moving on. You guys probably knew what this was just by seeing the sprayed edges. Dune. Primarily a pretty big intro to sci-fi for me, which I'm happy it was. Dune, I love the movies. The movies inspired me to read the book, and I had not known what it was, and I wish I had earlier in my life. Dune was a fantastic read. I also read Dune Messiah. I read Children of Dune. I haven't picked up God Emperor yet, although it might be the last read based on Mike Book Review's video on it. That might be where I put it down after God Emperor, because it already got a little weird in Children of Dune. That said, I did enjoy Children of Dune. I think I enjoyed Dune Messiah of the 3 more than Children of Dune. And then Dune, of course. This one has the action. It has everything you want. Political intrigue. It introduces you to Arrakis. It introduces you to Paul Atreides. It introduces you to everything that you kind of gets expanded on as the series goes on. There are just gems of quotes in this book. Gems. Absolute gems. That said, all the books that I mentioned so far, there are gems of quotes. In terms of application to life today, and like knowing when this was written and knowing Frank Herbert's mindset around it, it was, or at least like assuming Frank Herbert's mindset around the world and why he created it, this was absolutely a top tenner. It's number 7. So I need to drink water. This is like going, you know what I mean? We got Mountain Valley. I don't know, I refill this thing. It's not actually Mountain Valley water. I'm not sponsored. Sorry you guys had to watch that. Dune, number 7 on the list. Loved it. So you guys are getting a better idea of my taste so far. Now number 6. This one is a recent read, and maybe because of bias, it's up there. Imperium by Robert Harris. If you've watched any of my last 2 or 3 weekly updates of reading, I finished it very recently. It tells a story of Cicero through the framing narrative of one of his slaves, Tiro. It's a series. I don't know if I'm going to pick up books 2 and 3 simply because the person that recommended this to me, Library of Alexandria, said that you can read this as a standalone. I almost don't want to. I want to keep going. I want to be on the journey of with Cicero and with Tiro, and I want to see what continues to happen. with them, and I love the framing narrative that this is told through. It's very political. There's not a lot of like violence, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's number 6 on my list. I thought it would be a top 5er, but when I went through and really like looked at it's just so hard to put together a top 10. And again, these slide up and down. I'm gonna keep saying that because it's important. I say that because these are all great books, and there's so many books that I haven't read and books that I am currently reading that I would put on this list. I'm simply ranking them for the sake of you guys getting an idea of where my taste is currently, and this is 2024. Imperium, Cicero, Tiro, fantastic political intrigue. Told probably the best I've read political intrigue so far. And yeah, highly recommend. Number 6. Now we're moving into the top 5. Okay, things are gonna get pretty wild here. I mean, not really. These are, well, I don't know. Maybe you guys will find them a little interesting. Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. Joe Abercrombie, easily, I can say this with confidence, the top 3 author. Where I'd put him on that list, I just don't know yet. I know he's number 5 in the top 5, which is, I've just read more of his books than I have of the other people in my top 5. Oh crap, you can see that. Oh no, let me hide it with my Mountain Valley spring water. Last Argument of Kings, this puts together everything that Joe Abercrombie set up in the first 2 books in the first Law series. I just finished The Heroes. I'm going to be moving on to Red Country. I'm going to do that on Audible. I actually read the first Law, the first 3 in the trilogy physically, like through the paperbacks. And then I listened to Best Served Cold and The Heroes, and there are just so many characters you go back to that you just love. There's nothing I need to say that you haven't already heard about Joe Abercrombie. And if you're coming to this and this is your first time hearing of Joe Abercrombie, just put down your phone and pick up the books. Or pick up your phone and go on Audible and listen to Stephen Pacey's rendition of the first Law series, because every character's unique voice is told so beautifully through Stephen Pacey. And that said, the character work, if you're reading it physically, you know who you're reading. It takes a little bit in through the Blade itself. The first book, everything that this puts together from the first book as far as plot is concerned makes it all worth it. And the characters themselves, the humor, the gallows humor, which you'll see my top 5 books are all very dark, which if that doesn't give you any idea of my taste, then I don't know what does. I like dark fantasy. And this is at the peak of it. Last Argument of Kings, Joe Abercrombie, number 5. Moving on. Now this one was tough for me because I read them in quick succession, and it was one of those that I was going to split up. I was like, oh, I'll split it up. And then I just got addicted to the prose. I got addicted to hearing Severian's thoughts. And now that I spoiled it, Sword and Citadel by Gene Wolfe. Shadow and Claw was very good as well. I had a hard time picking between that omnibus versus this one, and Sword and Citadel edged it out. The horror that how Gene Wolfe writes, I know I'm saying horror, it's not a horror novel by any means, but there are some horror aspects to it. The genre bending that he does, the use of language, which is, I'm sure anybody that's read this series or has looked up anything about this book series, the Book of the New Sun, knows or has heard about. Just his ability to bend genre, his ability to put sci-fi and fantasy together in the way that he does, and the use of magic, we'll call it, it's phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. This world is phenomenal. His prose is phenomenal. His ability to tell story is phenomenal. His ability to tell story within story, phenomenal. There's a particular chapter in this book, I believe it's in this one. I could be messing it up. Maybe Shadow and Claw is my favorite of the 2. I read this so recently. This is one that you need to reread, and I am going to absolutely reread. I haven't read The Earth of the New Sun, the 3rd book in the trilogy, but this book has greatly impacted my writing in terms of just his ability to see the depths of Severian and his thought process and his prophecies, and the things that matter to him, and how things go from the very beginning to the very end from the very beginning of Shadow and Claw to the very end of Sword and Citadel, and how beautifully it all comes together, and his relationships. And I understand the criticism let me do that again. I understand the criticisms of this book, and there is a common thought process of people pretending to like it, and I get it. I cannot pretend to like this. This is just one of those that is so beautifully written, it's hard to not like. Let's put it that way. Again, I'm very much along for the ride with my books, and I as a writer, it's very easy to analyze. And I don't want to I'm not calling myself that for any other reason than looking at my inspirations with my own work. This has been one of the greatest impacts, and it's one of the greatest impacts of one of my other favorite authors, who I'm going to get to further on this list, and I spoiled it for people who know. I've talked about this too long. It's amazing. I can't tell you other than it's not everybody's taste. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, simply because I understand where it's easy to get lost. I was lost, but then I trusted Gene Wolfe, and he brought me back, and I can't wait to go through that book again. Just can't. Moving on. That was number 4. We're going to number 3. I have 2 copies of this book. One recently given to me for my 30th birthday by my girlfriend. Lonesome Dove. Now, this isn't everybody's. I say that loosely. This isn't a lot of people's top 10s of favorite books. The way it's written, I am an American, and I love a good Western. Tombstone is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm your Huckleberry. And Lonesome Dove just kind of brings you back to that Western and how it feels. It's dark, very dark, much darker than I was expecting it to be when I got into it. It pulls at your heartstrings. It follows 2 former Rangers from Texas Rangers who go on a cattle drive up to Montana. That's their goal. And it inspired, I think Taylor Sheridan is his name, the guy who show runs Yellowstone and 1883, 1923, like those shows on Paramount and whatever. And these books, we've been hunting down copies of the series of Lonesome Dove. I have them right here. I like used bookstores because we just love the series so much. Comanche Moon, Streets of Laredo here. She doesn't mind that they're weirdly sized. It's phenomenal. The character work, phenomenal. It's told from the omniscient third-person perspective. So it does jump around a little bit. I believe Clara, the one of the female characters introduced later in the book, is one of my favorite female characters I've ever read. And not that matters, just in terms of, I think actually, let me rephrase that. She's one of my favorite characters I've ever read. Getting inside of her brain was awesome. And just how her character and how she pushes the narrative and everything that she herself is in the story is phenomenal. Loved her. I obviously love Call. I love all the characters in this book. There's so many characters, and it is beautifully written. Gus. Read these books. Read this book, Lonesome Dove. It's dark. Warning for all the trigger warnings for this book. Moving on. Number 2. This one is probably going to be unpopular in terms of the series and what book I'm picking in the series, and that is Ashes of Man by Christopher Ruocchio. Now, why I'm picking this over Demon in White for everybody who loves Sun Eater. I haven't read Disquiet Gods yet. I'm currently catching up on all the short story stuff that he does. I'm reading volume 3 of Tales of the Sun Eater and then Dregs of Empire before I get into Disquiet Gods. Ashes of Man is my favorite, and I would cheat and put Kingdoms of Death with this because it was written as one book. But I'm simply not going to do that because Ashes of Man also deserves credit for what it is. And it is a phenomenal book. Everything that Christopher Ruocchio set out to do, I think, in the series, it starts to come to a head at the end of this book in terms of the prompt that he gave himself. Like, what if becoming Darth Vader was the right choice? And as a Star Wars fan, he really gets into it here. And just where Hadrian Marlowe is in his lifespan in this book in particular, of the 5 that I've read so far, including Kingdoms of Death, it is so wonderful to see Hadrian Marlowe's character development. I don't want to spoil anything about this series other than that. It's told by Hadrian Marlowe. So, from the very beginning of book 1 of Empire of Silence, this was a phenomenal read. As far as the emotional notes hit in this versus Kingdoms of Death, you're kind of just like I don't want to spoil anything. It's called Kingdoms of Death, and let's just say that it lives up to its name. And you're going through everything with Mr. Hadrian Marlowe. And in terms of the two books, between the two that I had to pick, this one beats out Howling Dark. It beats out Demon in White. I think Howling Dark beats out Demon in White for me as well, which barely edges it. This one just, and it's number 5 in a series. I don't want to spoil anything. I feel like I'm talking too much about it. Please pick up Son Eater. It's by far one of my favorite series. Heavily inspired by a lot of the other books in this top 10. And Christopher Ruocchio's writing, his prose. I mean, there's been so much said and so many videos talking about Son Eater that really get into it. And I might be talking too quietly now because I've been talking for 26 minutes. So let me move on to my number 1 so you guys can stop watching. I'm sure you skipped through this. But thanks for bearing with me if you haven't. If you have, you're here for the reward at the end of the tunnel, and that is book 1 in it's book 2 in the Malazan, Book of the Fallen series. I'm currently on Midnight Tides. Deadhouse Gates. There is something in this book that I had to go back and reread, and it hit every time I go back and read it. And for those of you who have read this book, who have read this series, know what I'm talking about. And there's just something about that struck me. And Memories of Ice has all of those emotional moments. But Deadhouse Gates is just, I can't wait to go back and reread the series once I'm done with it because of this book, just simply because of the emotional strikes the emotional chords that it hits. I forgot to mention, now that I'm talking about this, there's a scene in Last Argument of Kings that Joe Abercrombie has a character that's not seemingly important. In fact, I guess he's just not important. That I can go back, and I read it to my girlfriend when I first met her. For some reason, she came and visited me in California. I was like, I need to read you this. And then I read it, and it just hit me. Like, I had to stop reading it. Like, it's just, well, I kept going through it, but wow, it's just that there's just some stuff that he does. Sorry, let me go back to Deadhouse Gates. Malazan, Stephen Erikson's writing style. I know it's a very hard series to get into that people say. One thing I will say about Malazan, and I'm only 4 books done with it so far. Just be along for the ride. Lower your expectations in terms of what you're going to understand and just be along for the ride. And I know it's easier said than done because there are a lot of analytical minds out there who love reading. I don't want to tell you how to shape your experience of reading because everybody absorbs art differently. For me, I find that reading Malazan with my hands off the wheel and just letting Stephen Erikson take me for a ride has been one of the best experiences in reading that I've had so far. And only 4 books in, Malazan has superseded a lot of my favorite other books. Ashes of Man, it was really tight on this one in terms of putting together my top 10 for this specific video. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, any of these 16 or 15 books that I mentioned can slot in and out of this top 10. And as I continue to read in the series that I'm continuing, that will change. If you're along for the ride, follow my weekly updates on what I read. I'm moving on to Midnight Tides probably at the end of this month. I'll get back into it. I have to read a novel, The Dread Empire, I think one of the prequels there first, which was, again, a big inspiration of Stephen Erikson. I love reading my favorite author's favorite author. It's just something that I love seeing where their brains got the ideas from. And Stephen Erikson is just one of those authors that I'm able to connect with somehow. I'm not saying that, his talent is absolutely insane. I mean, Christopher Ruocchio, everybody I mentioned on this list, and people that I didn't mention in this video and how talented they are. I'm not saying they're not talented. I'm sure your favorite book, if you reader watching this, your favorite book and your favorite series has, your impression of it is very similar to mine of Malazan, I'm sure. So let me know down below what your guys' top 10s are. If you haven't made a video about it, let me know down below what they are. If you have made a video about it, point me to your channel and I'll go watch it. Obviously, you can see I love historical fiction in terms of genres. I love fantasy. I love sci-fi. I love thriller. I love political thriller. And I wanted to thank you guys for coming along. For those of you following along on my writing journey, everybody else, that was my top 10. It's done. Thank you guys for coming. Please subscribe. Please like. Let me know what you guys think down below of the channel and how probably bad I am at editing. I literally perch my phone up every week on a Darth Revan lightsaber. And that's just gonna be the way it is forever. But it's 2 days past my last writing update. Yesterday we went to go see my cousin play in Long Island, and he sings folk/country. Keith Pearsall on Spotify. I'll put him down below, just because I love his music. He's good. And then my writing, I added 500 words yesterday. I'm going to write later today. Wow, 30 minutes. Holy Hannah. Wow, that was a journey. Thank you guys for coming. Hey, if you're here at the end of the video, thank you for coming along. Thank you for listening to me ramble endlessly and hopefully not spoilery. I don't know. Honestly, I blacked out there for a good 30 minutes. So if I spoiled anything, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, let me know if there are books that you share in my top 10, top 15. If not, that's just, sometimes I just haven't read the things that you've read yet. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. That's my taste and kind of what it's like right now. Currently reading Assassin's Apprentice, Riven Earth, and Empire of the Vampire. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you next week.